One of the great things about Sublime Text is how we can configure it to work the way that we would like it to work. We can add features that are missing. We can tweak existing functionality. We can really make it our own. This, of course, is all done by the installation of packages and plugins. And the package ecosystem in Sublime Text is really quite large. The statistics on the package control website indicate that there's almost 5,000 packages available. There's over 17 million users of package control, and there's roughly 68,000 package installations every single day. Now, despite all of those users and all of those packages that are available in all those installations, you can find sometimes that the package that you want doesn't exist or doesn't quite do exactly what you would like it to do. Now, in either of those cases, you may have found yourself wishing that you could enhance the functionality of Sublime Text via a plugin. But historically, there hasn't been a lot of information available about how to get started in plugin and package development in Sublime Text. That is about to change. Hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. ODAT Nerd here. My voice is still a little bit croaky from being sick, but I'm not going to let that stop me from getting through the introduction to this week's video, which is a little bit of a hybrid video. We do have some juicy tutorial content for you near the end of the video here, but I have a little bit of channel news to convey here. And that news has to do with the package and plugin development series that we've talked about a few times on the channel back in December, for example. One of the things I've wanted to do with this channel since the very beginning is start teaching people how to write packages and plugins in Sublime Text, because there's not really a good resource, at least none that I've found, that gives you that information. And I have been saying for a while that this is upcoming on the channel, and the time for it is now, right now. I mean, well, actually, April 6th, which is the very first video that's going to appear in April. That's going to be the first video in this package and plugin development series in Sublime Text. We're going to start with the very basics, everything you need to know, all of the classes in the API, how to get around the API, all that stuff. So building up your knowledge so that you can create your own plugins, look at existing plugins, know what they're doing, and make Sublime Text that much more sublime. And if you're not interested in that topic per se, don't worry. We are not going to stop the video series that has been on the channel low this last year, because April 1st of last year was in fact when I started the channel in earnest, uploading videos on a weekly basis. And what a hell of a year it's been. Thank you all so much for the support there. There's still a ton of information to get out about Sublime Text and how to work and how to get the most out of it. Those videos are not going to be stopping anytime soon. Although I would point out that knowing a little bit about how plugins work behind the scenes can enhance your knowledge about how the packages you're using are working, which can make your knowledge of Sublime Text that much better. So you may be interested in watching these videos anyhow. And before we jump into the tutorial content of this week's video, I should point out I have an alternate channel, have had for a while. It's linked down in the description of every video on this channel. And since the beginning of this year, it's been linked in the end cards on videos as well. And over on that channel, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific, I do a live stream of Sublime Text package development. And I should really talk about this more. I really don't talk about it as much as I should, but what with the video series on package development starting, I think it behooves me to point out that if you have any questions about those videos when you're watching them, you need more clarification, you just want more clarification on topics in Sublime Text in general, the live streams are a great way to hop in, ask questions, and get answered right away. We can have a back and forth in the chat and in the video, show examples live of things happening. I think that is a great resource. And we do have the entirety of the library of those playbacks down in the description of this video, assuming I remember to link the playlist for that. So you could, if you wanted to, go back and watch the hours and hours of live stream content. So in that vein, the topic of this week's video is plugin development in Sublime Text. And just to show you what the live streams are like, this week's video is an excerpt from the last video live stream that we did, which was on March 10th, Mario Day, answering a question that someone had in the Sublime Text Discord right before the live stream started. So this is just a small clip of part of that person's question. Of course, the live stream continued on past this point into a bunch of other stuff. You could watch that. It's linked down in the description as well. And I thought because we're going to be doing the video series on plugin development, this is sort of a sneak peek taste of what those videos are going to be like. Now, before we dive into this, I should point out I do my live streaming from my Linux box and not from the Windows machine that I normally use to create these videos. And I'm using the archived footage that I recorded while I was creating the live stream. So we can't do the normal zoom and pan that we do in these videos. And the camera is locked down into the corner there. But I think you're going to enjoy what you see here and hope to see you in the live streams when they actually happen and get those questions out. So that's enough of me yammering. Let's go ahead and jump on into past me talking about past problems, plugin development. Kind of went off the rails. Roll tape. That might be an idea of something to play with too. But just before the stream started, there was a question that someone was asking. I believe the name was Slalom in the Discord. And I think they're trying to work on some sort of, I don't want to say linting tool, but like I say, a code formatting tool or something along those lines that will modify the content of a buffer. And Slalom, and apologies if I'm misremembering that now, wanted to get a little bit of help, and I recommended maybe hopping into the live stream, but he lives in Portugal, or she lives in Portugal, they live in Portugal, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning there. So I thought, based on the question, we might do just a little bit of an exploration in how you could create a command that will modify this content of a buffer in place in some particular fashion. So, and in excuse me, in the nature of trying to do that, say as explanatorily as possible, which is not something that generally happens here in the live stream. Apologies for that. Where I tend to just sort of do stuff like say new plugin, like so. Maybe I might even type that correctly. My keyboard layout's all funky. Let's go ahead and do it this way. So let's say we want to create a plugin that could take the content of some file of a particular type, grab the whole thing out, and then do some sort of work on it, a line at a time, and put the results back into the current file or into a new file. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go up to the Tools menu and we're going to choose Developer, New Plugin, like so, which is the same thing as me doing New Plugin here because I added this to my command palette. Now we have this stub plugin here, and I'm going to go ahead and save this. It's going to default to my user package, and we're going to call it, say, File Rewriter, just so that it is something specific. Now, the name doesn't matter, only the extension matters. It has to be in a package. This is going to put it in your user package, and it should be in the root of the package because only Python files in the root of a package are considered plugins. All the other Python files are considered Python files. You have to do importing of those things manually in your plugin. That's more of an advanced topic. Now, if we're going to run this thing, hello, Ashwin. Welcome to the stream. Phew. You may or may not have missed my pre-apology. I'm still a little bit coughy. Sometimes they catch me unawares and a cough slips out before I have a chance to catch it or mute myself. We're just going over a question that Slalom was asking in the Discord here. Now we're going to assume, based on what was previously asked by this user, that they want to do this in a command. And we're going to do this in a text command because only text commands get the edit parameter that will allow us to actually modify the content of a file. So now our command is named example command. We'll go ahead and name this, let's say, file rewrite command, like so. And save that. And we're also going to go into the, well, we'll do this way. Key bindings file, which for some reason has opened on the wrong monitor. And super T, yeah, there we go. I was doing an example of something to help someone on the forum, the guy that was having the macro problem, as a matter of fact. And what did I call that thing? I already forget. Yeah. File rewrite. Rewrite. Now I can push this key and trigger that command. I'll even spell that correctly, shall I? So if we were to add, push that key, hello world is injected into the top of the buffer. So this command is totally working. Now, the other thing we're going to do here is immediately do an is enabled. Oh, good grief. Hang on. Let me scooch myself up. Incidentally, Ashwin, good work on that plugin example that you did in the Stack Overflow. That pretty much exactly what I would have done in that particular case as well. Yeah, I've been a little bit croaky, but otherwise I'm feeling okay. I can breathe okay. I think I have a little bit of chest congestion still, not a lot. It's not keeping me awake like it has been. So that's good. Now here in our file rewrite command, we're going to have this is enabled here because we're going to say we want this to only be enabled in a certain type of file. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to say self view match selector at 0.0 with, let's say, source.python, like this. I'm going to go ahead and do that and scoot that over so that we can actually look at this thing. What's this actually doing? Well, again, because we're trying to be more tutorially in this particular segment than we sometimes are on the channel, the isEnabled method is something that will be invoked on your command if Sublime wants to know if your command should be enabled right now. This should return a true or false. If it returns false, the command is not enabled. Key bindings won't work. The command won't appear in the command palette if you've added it there, and if you've added it to a menu, it'll appear visibly gray. Now, match selector is something that allows us to match the selector at a given point in the file to see if it matches that scope selector or not. So here we're testing to see if the position 0 matches source.python. And the idea here is because this is supposed to be based on a specific type of file, then the base scope throughout the entire file is always going to be the same. So you can just use 0.0 and that will reference the entire file. And you can figure out what the base scope for any particular file type is by opening a file of that type and going into the tools, I'll go this way, developer, show scope name, which has this particular key binding here on Linux, Control-Alt-Shift-P, and that's going to pop up source.python, and that's how I came up with that. Now, depending on where you invoke this in the file, you'll see various different things because this is how syntax highlighting and various other things work in Sublime. But the very first line is always the one that represents the type of the file. It's always source dot followed by something if it's a source file, and text dot followed by something if it's a text file. So here we're saying we want this to only be enabled in a Python file. So because this is a Python file, when I press the key bound to this, hello world appears up there in the corner. But if I just had a regular text file, this key no longer does anything because it's binding itself and stopping itself from happening here. Now, what we wanted to have happen here is we wanted to be able to grab the entire content of a file and modify it in some way. And you would gather the content of a file by using the substr method on a view, because a view represents a file, and because this is a text command, we have a view associated with our command. So self.view represents the file that this is currently active inside of, and substr is going to grab the content of some part of it. Indeed, I was thinking that very thing. The comment there is parts of this live stream can actually serve as supplementary material for your new package dev series. I was thinking that, and I'm trying to do a bit more tutorially type stuff in these so that if I do get sick and I can't make a video, I can pluck some content out and use it as a best of hits, clip show kind of operation. I'm going to do this. We can see that view substr takes the content of whatever region you give it and returns it back as a string. And you can create a region by using sublime.region, which of course is a class in the Sublime module that represents an area of the buffer. You provided a beginning and an end, which is A and B. Those are character positions inside of the file. So this is position 0, this is position 1, this is position 2, and so on. And that's how you span a region of text. And here we want to say that this region spans the first character in the file all the way into the last character in the file, which is the length of this thing, because it is a character-based count, even if you're using Unicode where characters are sometimes 2 bytes instead of 1. This is always, positions are always referenced based on characters. And we could say len self.view. Now there's another way to do that too. You can use view.size. If you want to do this, this returns the number of characters in the file. So that's another way to do this. You could say self.view.size instead of the length of self.view, whichever one of those you find cooler. So this is going to grab the content of this particular file, and we want to put that into a variable. So we'll say content equals like so. And just for our purposes, I'm going to go ahead and print the content. Now when I press the key, when this file has the focus, we see down there in the console, it's grabbed the entire content of this thing. It's all one string. So now we have the content of this particular file. Now I believe Slalom mentioned that he wanted to do something modifying the file on a line-by-line basis. So for that, you would say for line in content dot split /n is probably one way to do that. And we could say print line. And if I hit the key, you end up with what looks to be the exact same output, but now it's printing it one line at a time. And if we were to say something like this, then we could see that in fact it's now printing this thing one line at a time. So if you want to do something one line at a time, this is a way to do that. Now he wants to do some sort of manipulation on this particular thing. So what we could do here is say result is going to be an empty list, and we're going to append into the result, let's say, the current line as is. And then down here we can say print result. The idea being we're going to iterate through this file content one line at a time, do something with it. We're not going to have that space in there. That's not going to work. This is going to be do something, and then we append the results in, and when we're done, we end up with theoretically a list of all of the modified content in the file, right? And we can see that here. So here's the first line, here's the second line. Right now, we're not doing anything with this, but what we could probably do is something like reverse, like so. I think that's a thing. And no, shoot. I was actually just thinking probably could use that weird reverse slice operator thing. Let's see. You know how we always have to remember how this stuff works? Yeah, there we go. Let's say we want to actually reverse the content of this file. And one of the nice things about the Sublime console is your ability to hop in there and test things out before you get going. So we're going to say : -1. That's going to append a reversed content. So now every line in the file is in here, but it's backwards. Import Sublime, but backwards. And of course, you could actually do something much more exciting in this case. Now, what we actually want to do here is replace the content in this file with our newly modified result. And if I was to come over here and do replace, we can see that the view.replace method, let me move that up to make sure that it's above my big fat head in the window. The view replace method takes an edit that represents how we're going to be able to edit this thing. More on that in just a second. The region of the change that's going to be modified, and the text to actually be inserted in there. So let's go ahead and do that. This is a view, so we want self.view because we're going to put it inside of this particular file, and we want to replace. Now this first argument is an edit. This very specifically is just a magic object, if you will, that Sublime provides to you. You have to give it to any of the API commands that directly modifies the content of a buffer. And essentially what's happening is I'm coughing into my hand and then saying that behind the scenes, Anytime a bunch of edits in one sequence of commands happen, they get bundled together using this edit object so that Sublime knows these are all changes that happened as a part of one key press or something like that. And that's how this undo system is done. So it's basically associating the edits you're making in the file with undo entries in the buffer there. And that's why if you were to make multiple edits inside of one text command, the undo will undo all of them all at once. If you want to make 3 changes and have them separately undoable, then you need to do that as 3 separate instances of a text command being executed. And this thing sort of snowballs on you because if we were to use something like view self.view.run command insert inside of this, then we're executing another command that's also modifying the buffer, but because it's still technically part of this command, because our command doesn't finish until it falls off the bottom of run, then all of the edits made by that run command and any commands that it runs and so on down the line will also be bundled up into that one undo thing. And because of that edit grouping, only you need an edit object to be able to modify the buffer so that the undo system knows how to track changes, and only text commands can receive and edit, and text commands are the only way for you to get one of these things, which is technically a lie because if you know what you're doing, you can create one of these things, but the world will fall down around your head if you do, so, don't. So here we are, we're going to replace the content of the current file. Now again, we need to provide, as we can see here, the region, the content of this file that we want to modify. And that's easy, it's this. The exact thing, the exact region that specified the text that we pulled out, that's the region we want to replace because we want to replace the entire contents of this file with something else. And then we need the content of this particular file. And for that, I think we could say we want a new line and we want to join the result array like so. So we take that array of strings and join them back together into one big string so we can call this thing. And now that I saved that, assuming this is all correct, when I push the key, the entire content of the buffer should reverse itself in place. And the syntax highlighting gets more than a little unhappy about it, but in fact, that is indeed what is happening there. And I'm gonna undo that particular operation. So if you wanted to replace update a content of a file directly in place, this is a way to do that. And of course, you could dial in these replacement regions as well. Now, something else that was asked by Slalom last week or some number of days ago that wasn't today was something like this, but instead of replacing the current file, making a new tab in the current window and putting the content in there instead. And here's how you would do that. You need a window and you need to say new file because we want to be able to create a new file in this thing. Here we can see window.new file is going to create a new file and the returned view will be empty. Now in specific, this is going to create a new file, which is really a new view, and it's going to create it in a window because all views have to exist in a window. Pardon me. And there are a few ways to get a window. You could say sublime.active window, like so. Now, no matter where you run this particular bit of code, whatever window is currently the active one, even if there's more than one, will be the one that is returned. If your current command is a window command, a Sublime plugin.window command instead of a text command, then you could say self.window, because in the same way a text command is associated with a file and has a self.view, a window command has a self.window, which represents the window that it's currently running inside of. And because every file appears in a window, if you have a file, you can ask it what window it's currently in, and this is a method, it's not a property, so put the brackets around at the end there to make sure you're calling it. Now that we have the window that the current file is in, we can ask it to create a new file like so, and this is going to return a view, if you will. I'm going to call it, we'll call it view here. You could also call it something like, say, new file, just so that you don't mistake it for self.view, because remember, self.view is the source tab, the thing we're getting the source that we're going to modify from. New file is where it's going. And now that we have this new file type thing here, we can inject our content into it. We're going to comment out that, but I will steal this thing. Now, if you want to inject data into a file like that, remember we said if you want to modify the content of a file, you have to have an edit object for that particular operation, and the only thing that gets one of those is a text command. Now, technically, we're a text command and we have an edit, but this edit is associated with the file that this command is running in, which is, if I push the key right now, this file right here. So we can't use that edit. We can't do something like self.view.replace or self.view.insert or something like that in this returned view, because that edit doesn't associate with it. Best case scenario, nothing happens. Worst case scenario, the fabric of the space-time continuum folds in on itself. That probably won't happen. So what we actually need to do is run a command. And as it turns out, there's a command called insert that does that, and append does it as well. And we're going to say we want the new file to run a command named append. That command takes an argument with the characters that should be inserted, and that is the contents of our results joined back together in new line. Now, what's the difference, technically speaking, between append and insert? The difference between these two things, besides the fact that if you just had a view in any particular situation, for example, if I was right here and I said view.run command insert, then the text would be inserted at wherever the selection is. Or if there's more than one selection, it'll be inserted into all of them. When you use append, it's always stuck to the end of the buffer, no matter what selections actually happen to exist in there. And the other thing to note is, if I did, let's do something like this. We're going to say we want to insert into the current view, which is my plugin right now. And this command also takes characters. And if we said 1 and let's say, what do we want to put in here? We want to put 4 spaces and say 1, and then a new line, and then 2. And if I execute this, we end up with 1 and then 2. Now note the text that I inserted in here is 4 spaces and the word 1, which is this one, then a new line, which should put the cursor to the left, but it is picking up on the indent in this thing, right? So the second word, even though there's no spaces in between the new line and the 2, gets that indent in there. If we instead did the same thing and used the append command here, when we hit the thing, we end up with exactly the text that we wanted to insert. 4 characters, 1, the new line, and then the 2. So all else being equal in this case, because we have a brand new file and we don't know what the content of this file is, you want to make sure that you use append in this case to make sure that it doesn't do weird auto-indenty things for you. I'm going to go ahead and hit the key now, and here we end up with a new file that has the reversed content of this. So whereas this line replaced the content of the current view, now we're creating a different one instead. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now what we could also even do here, if we really wanted to get fancy, is we could say sublime dot run command cannot type, and the command we want is new window, like so. Now once we do that, we'll end up with a new window. In fact, we can even do that down here to make sure that it's going to work. And there is a new window that has been created. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now This isn't going to return a value because run command doesn't return a value. It asks Sublime to run a command. So here's where you would say window equals sublime.active window, because once a window is activated or created, it becomes active. And if that was the case, then we could say, instead of this, we could say window.new file. And now we're going to put the content of this thing into the new window that we created in here. And of course, in this case, you don't have to create a variable named window. We could just say sublime.activeWindow.new file if we wanted to do this. But if you wanted to continue using that window, that is how you would pull something like that off. We're going to back all of that out like so. And we're also going to do that instead. So we're back to the idea that if we do this, we're going to modify the content of this original thing. And we're going to stop the sample right there, but in the live stream, we did continue on with more discussion on this topic, including more advanced ways to do the same thing, targeting your edits in the file rather than grabbing the entire file, modifying parts of it, and putting the whole thing back again. We even worked on another plugin from first principles all the way up to a working prototype, including the addition of extra commands and an event lister. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, the remainder of that live stream can be found linked down in the description of this video. And if you're interested in the topic of Sublime Text, plugin, and package development, remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because those videos are coming. And you may also want to subscribe to my alternate channel, which is again linked down in the description of this video and in the end card of my videos as well. If you'd like YouTube to let you know when I'm going live, so you can hop into the live stream, say hi, ask questions, and get them answered right there live, and get those back and forth going. And that's all I have for this week's video. So remember, if you have any questions, comments, requests for clarification, requests for other Sublime Text topics you'd like to see me cover, even suggestions for what we should cover in live streams, the comment section below this video is where all that good stuff goes. And until the next video, this is ODAT Nerd asking you to please have a sublime day.